Hi everyone, welcome to the EarlyON. My name's Denise and I'm a resource consultant with Lansdowne Children's Center. Today I'm going to share some information about 3 common parenting traps and tips and how to avoid them. Parenting, even though we've been doing it for ages, is still a work in progress. Despite generations of passed down knowledge and experience, it seems like it always comes down to a situation where it's after bedtime, you're sleep deprived, and you're running on leftover mac and cheese, and you will do just about anything to get your child into the bath. This is how any well-meaning parent can fall into certain parenting traps. Without some kind of course correction, these can become patterns that are harder and harder to break. Think of it like quicksand. You get sucked in bit by bit until you are stuck. But armed with some good information going in, a parent will be less likely to be tempted by the initial allure of the trap and more likely to recognize it as it's happening. Here are some of the most common parenting traps adapted from the Positive Parenting Program's list of parenting's most common mistakes. Number 1 is the escalation trap. The escalation trap happens in 2 different ways. The first is when the child escalates. Perhaps your child wants something, a candy bar or to play a video game. You tell them no, it's too close to dinner, or you've already used up your screen time for today. The child responds with whining, begging, or a tantrum. And he keeps it up until you're worn down and eventually you give in. Thinking to yourself, you will do anything to stop the whining. I think we have all been there. What your child has learned is that the way he gets the candy or the game time is by getting louder, having a bigger tantrum, whining more, crying more. This learning increases the chances the next time that he encounters a no and is frustrated, he will likely try that same strategy again. Sometimes it's a child teaching the parent that she will only respond after the parent escalates. This classic example is when you say, "Okay kids, it's time to wash up for dinner." They're watching TV and they do nothing. So a few minutes later, you come back and you say a little bit louder, "I said it's time to come in for dinner." Maybe they say, "Okay, yes, in a few minutes," but a few minutes later, they are still not at the dinner table. The third time, you're visibly angry and you order them to the dinner table, probably shouting, and that's when they finally come in. They know that they don't really have to move until you raise your voice. The problem here is that you're learning that the only way to get them to do what you want them to do is to yell. And they're learning that the first time you say something, it doesn't really count. Mom and dad don't really mean it unless they are shouting. What to do? Avoiding escalation requires sticking to your guns and remaining calm while doing so. If you said no to a child's request, your goal then is to ignore behavior directed at getting you to change your mind. It is not easy, but it's an investment in reducing that behavior in the future. When the child stops acting up and goes back to playing quietly or speaking in a calm tone of voice, be ready with positive reinforcement. "I love the way you've calmed down," or "It's so nice when you speak to me this way." The same is true if you're making a request and your child is ignoring you. You can repeat your request once, but without escalating, and let her know that a consequence will follow if you don't get results. I said, it's time for dinner. If you don't come wash up, you're going to lose 10 minutes of screen time after dinner. And when she does comply, be ready with the praise, even if you did have to ask twice. The next is, it's just a phase trap. Another trap that parents fall into is when you notice behavior that's problematic and you hope naturally that it will go away on its own, and so you don't respond. You think, it's just a phase, minimizing the behavior so you won't actually have to address it. For instance, maybe your toddler is being aggressive on play dates, and you think, surely this is just some kind of passing developmental thing. This is just what kids do. It very well may be that your child will eventually stop engaging in this problematic behavior, hitting or pushing, grabbing. However, the way you and others respond to it may be the key to how quickly it actually does go away. If children test the limits of those around them and no one intervenes, then they learn that this kind of behavior is acceptable, or even that it gets them attention, however negative. That kind of learning is very important in young children, and it gets harder to undo as children get older. So what to do? All toddlers are going to hit, bite, take toys away. They're exploring these as new behaviors, but it's important that we respond in a way that lets them know what is off limits. Think of the behavior as an experiment by the child, and you are providing the result to that child's experiment. Setting limits coupled with praise as often as possible when the child doesn't engage in the problematic behavior can help us manage these behaviors as they pop up. Number 3, the you do this on purpose trap. This is interpreting a child's behavior as something done intentionally to annoy or otherwise tax you, the parent. For instance, you tell your child it's time to stop playing and get ready and leave to go to grandma's house. When you come back 10 minutes later, he's still playing. You hear yourself say, I told you to get ready to go to grandma's house, and you knew that it was important to me and you didn't do it. And you are doing this deliberately to annoy me. The danger here is that if you think a child is doing something intentionally to bother or to hurt you, you're going to respond a lot differently than if you were to see the behavior that it isn't about you. Perhaps the child is having difficulty emotionally or doesn't have well-developed coping strategies to conquer anxiety he has about going to grandma's or being away from home, or most likely he just made a mistake. There are dozens of possible reasons for why the behavior is occurring, the least likely of which is that it is intentionally done to bother you. If we think the behavior is intended to push our buttons, we are more likely to respond with a negative emotion, rather than responding in a calm way and thinking about how to discourage the behavior in the future or support your child through difficult tasks. It will also be harder to praise the behaviors we do not want to see if you are angry at your child. So what to do? First of all, we need to take the word manipulative in reference to our kids out of our vocabulary. There's nothing positive that will come from thinking of your children as the masterminds and yourself as a victim. When our kids are acting out, we need to try to remember that they haven't developed adult self-control yet. Throwing a tantrum is usually less calculated than it is desperate. You want to muster as much insight as you can into how the behavior may have developed and what function the behavior serves for the child. This will be a way to maintain a cool head and then plan how you would like to respond in an effective way the next time, because we know it is inevitable that there will be a next time. This information is by Matthew Rouse, PhD, related readingonchildmind.org. Thank you so much for joining our Early On parent session today.
A resource consultant from the Early Integration Program is available to talk to you should you want more information, support, or to discuss any concerns or questions you may have. Please contact us by email at eip@lansdowncc.com or by phone at 519-753-3153. Ask reception if you can speak to a resource consultant.